Welcome back to The Highs and Lows, the podcast that busts myths or builds new ones in one of the world's most misunderstood professions, law. Whether you're a seasoned lawyer, a prospective student, or just here for the legal drama, you're in the right place.
That's right. And today we'll get to learn what lawyers and sales people have in common, how friendships can define legal paths, and how Frank Sinatra can inspire prospective lawyers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pablo Hontoria, partner at Pérez-Llorca international law firm. Pablo, you've had quite an international career. Madrid, New York, and now Singapore. Take us with you on this journey. How did it happen?
So I met Rafa, our common friend in law school. We went together to same class, international law. And I remember the professor was always late. We used to sit together, and just because we were waiting for the professor for 20 minutes every day, we start talking about lives and things. And then we organized a graduation trip to Asia. That was my first time in Singapore, actually, 2011. And then after that, I joined Pérez-Llorca, which at the time was a very small law firm. It's a Spanish independent law firm. And it was growing a lot at the time. But when I joined the firm, we were about 70 lawyers. We're now, after we merged a Mexican law firm, about 800. And then at that time, I was preparing my application for an LLM in the US, running from Europe for a while. Out of nowhere, out of the blue, one of the partners called me on a Thursday afternoon, and they asked me to go with him to open the New York office of the firm. This was 2015. Then we moved to the US, to New York in September 2015. Then I worked in the New York office, and then I went to Colombia to do my LLM. I took the bar exam, and I joined a US law firm called Wilkie Farr in their New York office, where I worked for 2 years. They asked me, okay, what is your plan? So I asked them, okay, what's your plan for my career? And they say, okay, we are considering opening another office. This time would be in Asia. This was end of 2020. So in the midst of the pandemic, basically, and I was still in the US. And they said it's going to be either China, Singapore, or Hong Kong. And at the end of the day, we decided that the best place to be at this point was Singapore. It's a great hub to travel in the region, and basically everyone in business has a rep office here, headquarters for the region here. So I moved here in 2023.
You certainly had an exciting 10 years. Was moving around the world always part of the plan, or did it happen unexpectedly?
Being a Spanish lawyer traveling around the world, I think it's not easy for a lawyer. No, it's a profession that is very localized to your country, to your jurisdiction. So I think I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to travel around the world.
Yeah, that's mad. And to rewind just slightly, did you always want to do law?
So first of all, I think it wouldn't be my first option when I was 16, 17. And my first option will always be to be a football player, soccer player. First one, for sure. So I was completely addicted to football. I was playing 24/7 every single day of the week. Then after that, be more realistic, it would be being a psychologist. But I thought that it wouldn't be a way to. So one of your questions, I think, is about what is the real motivation, or the archetype that reflects your personality or your goals in life. So for me, it's clearly the Midas touch. So basically, I thought, okay, I like psychology, but in Spain, it's not a good way to make money. So why I wouldn't do other thing, which is law, right? And why law and not any other thing? Is because when I was 16 or 17, I remember one summer, I started reading these books by John Grisham, which is probably like The Firm, The Pelican Brief, or The Partner, all these books. And I saw these guys, these famous lawyers in this, usually I think it's litigation. So these huge arbitration or civil settlements, hundreds of millions, where the lawyer was driving these Porsche or this Ferrari and everything. So I thought, okay, this is what I want to do.
And did things turn out to be like, as John Grisham describes them in his legal thrillers? Did a typical day entail like this dramatic litigation? Or how is life at the headquarters of an international law firm?
So first of all, it's not a typical day as for any other lawyer, like in the quarters office of a law firm. So I do a lot of BD work. I travel a lot. I'm going to Mexico next week, then to Korea, then 10 days in Singapore, going to Japan, when going to conferences, doing events, meetings with clients. The key things I do almost every morning, even weekends, is to organize my inbox, see what's on the table, what is the urgent task, what can wait, and I have my to-do emails. So I listen to myself almost on a daily basis. So I have everything under control. And now that I'm in Singapore, I wait until my team wakes up. I have people here as well, but I also work with people in Madrid.
It sounds like you're in the crossroads between law and business development. So what is business development for a lawyer?
So this is also a good question because I think that we're seen as sometimes boring, busy people just doing very sophisticated cases or transactions, very technical. And I think this is part of the job as well. But at the end of the day, we're salespeople, right? Like you're selling watches or you're selling, I don't know, shoes or whatever. We're doing the same, but with services, right? So it is a very important part of the job and of the work to have social skills, to manage teams and manage projects. So it's more about business development, like in terms of engaging with people, make people want to work with you. There are so many lawyers out there, and you just have to convince people to work with you.
Pablo, you mentioned that at some point in your life, you wanted to be a psychologist. And I hear that your daily life entails a lot of interaction with people, understand different people. And what would you say that lawyers, they have to play a little bit this role as well, right? With their clients and the people they engage with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a big component of psychology first when you're negotiating. So I do transactional work. So it's not like litigation, which as well has some strategy. What I do is mostly negotiating contracts, and you need to put on the other party's shoes and understand their needs, their requests. So I think it's really important to understand people, also your team. Sometimes you work under pressures. It's definitely very closely related. And you need to understand the business of the people. Sometimes it's a family business selling for the time, or it's the first time that a private equity firm investing in a family-owned company. So it's also about emotions and have everything under control. Definitely.
You have worked in different environments. You've worked in Spain, you have worked in Singapore. And I was wondering, are there any misconceptions about lawyers that are universal or specific to these countries?
Not sure if misconceptions, but I'm sure there are some stereotypes that there are about lawyers that sometimes people perceive as aggressive, for example, and I don't think is the case. Or as I mentioned, people that are very technical into the legalities, where sometimes we're just happen to be helping coordinate the transaction from a business perspective. We need to be very business oriented. It's not only about understanding the law, even more for transactional work when it comes to cross-border transactions. At the end of the day, I would say that 95% is always the same in an SPA, in a contract, and then you will go for this 5 to 10%. It's related to local regulations or local tradition, customs, whatever.
It made me feel, like you said about aggressiveness, made me think that, for example, I'm Greek, I studied law many years ago. Then I worked in Brussels, and in Brussels, they're highly regarded, the lawyers. Then I was in a group of American people. They were mainly doctors there. And in the United States, there is a lot of litigation against doctors for malpractice. So the perception of the lawyers was very different.
This is something that when I was in the US, working in the US, so I could see how lawyers, even you're in a club at night and you say you're a lawyer, people would, wow, you're a lawyer. You must be someone smart and someone rich. And when you're in a meeting and there's, I don't know, 80 people in the meeting and the partner starts speaking, everyone would, stop speaking and listen and start listening. And, they would also speak about the numbers, the figures of the transaction, business stuff, and everyone would listen and pay attention to what the lawyers were saying. While when you're in Spain, It's kind of, okay, this guy is the lawyer, so just speak as little as you can. And it's something necessary. We have to have a lawyer here, but if we could, we just don't count on you. So the figure of the lawyer in the US, I feel, is much more respected than in Spain. That's for sure.
Yeah. Now, we'd like to take you somewhere else. We want to talk a little bit about the legal profession and technology. In the mind of a lot of people, these are two different planets. I must say, in my perception, too, it was the case until we started this podcast and we have discovered a whole world of legal technology. I want to have your take. So, on a scale from a mere buzz to revolutionary, where would you place, for example, AI and why?
I would say it's to be revolutionary. It has a lot of potential, and I think it will make life much easier. I think it will also have an impact on the size of the teams and the law firms in the future, in the coming years. That's definitely something is going to happen, and you can ignore that. But on the other hand, I think that there's some areas where they have made some good progress, such as due diligence, for example, analyzing certain types of agreements and getting some conclusions or some information from agreements. But at the same time, in other areas such as drafting, for example, I think there is a lot of room to improve in terms of adapting or preparing a first draft an agreement using defined terms, using properly cross references, being able to, if you make a change in a clause 2 and this has an impact in clause 7, doing that automatically is, I think, is something that we haven't, it will happen for sure at some point. But for now, I think it is a great support tool. But I think there is still some room to improve.
That's so funny because it's something that we hear. Like you're echoing sentiments that there's so much talk about it. And yet some lawyers will say, look, the technology's not there yet. And then we can't deny that there has been an improvement, especially like you mentioned due diligence. Oh, as a trainee doing due diligence, it was heartbreaking having to pull in serious long hours to review every single agreement. And now technology can pull half the weight of that. Besides legal technology, do you have any personal, if you could pick any invention sorry, it can be also related to law, what would it be?
What invention for me in terms of work would be something that I could speak to the laptop or introduce some instructions, and then they would produce a first draft of an agreement, an SPA, like perfectly adapted to the deal. That would be amazing because after that, the biggest effort is usually preparing the first draft. And then after that, it's just back and forth with the other party to negotiate the terms, the agreements, or implement changes, which is usually easier. But what I encounter many times is that when the other party's counsel is not that sophisticated, sometimes it takes more time to redo their first draft rather than doing one from scratch by myself. Not from scratch, but from a template I would have. That would be, you could standardize this first draft for everyone. It's certain degree of development and quality that would be incredible.
Maybe it's not that far away when you think about it, when you think all of the companies now racing to get like the perfect drafting contract tool, maybe you'll actually get your wish soon enough.
I think it's not that far. It's going to happen in the next few years, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can go negotiating your deal. Okay, moving on, say from technology and just back to the fact that you have such diverse experience that spans 3 continents. Do you have any advice that you would share with someone thinking of going into law?
First, I would say I would recommend them to study engineering or something like that. So don't go into law. And then after that, I think it's a very interesting industry. I always feel like I envy a little bit the companies for the people I'm advising. But I would tell them to be ready to work hard, be resilient, and try to focus on their social skills, because at the end of the day, the life as an associate is somehow limited to a certain amount of years. And after that, you think you are done because you are a partner, and then you see, no, this is the beginning of the real life as a lawyer, right? Just becoming a partner and then having your professional career as a partner is when the real game starts. So I think for them, I don't think technical or matters of being super technical person is very important because everything is on internet nowadays. It's more important to have the right social skills to negotiate with other parties, different cultures, in cross-border transactions, being able to manage your team downwards and upwards. So deal with your boss, deal with your juniors, your teammates, your colleagues. So I think it's something that I would highly recommend. If you can do any negotiation workshop or course or something else, that would be great.
And that's interesting. Just to go back on what you said, the life as a partner. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because what we see in the movies is that basically you're the boss and Harvey Specter is pouring a glass of whiskey because he just closed a deal in 24 hours.
All right. So I think is first of all, it's a big change from being an associate and becoming a partner because you basically are someone that has to be at the entire disposal of the firm, the client, and the partner. When you're an associate, you're expected to accommodate to the needs of the client and the partner at all times, 24/7, every day of the year. And then suddenly, from one day to another, you become a partner and you become the boss. You could still work with senior partners in big deals or huge transactions, but generally you are the boss and you're the one running the party, right? It's a big difference. It's not about only having a whiskey after closing. It still is very demanding, working hard with clients. First of all, as I mentioned, you are a salesperson. So first you need to get clients and deals, which is very challenging. There is a lot of competition. It is in general a very mature market. So first of all, you have to combine your business development work to say as a salesperson and then with the real work, the billing your hours and making, the budget. So it is basically a combination of both worlds, which I find more interesting because you interact more with clients, counterparties than when you are an associate. You tend to be more in your office, just working on the agreements and drafting documents. So for me, it's more fun, and I would encourage any associates to be patient because at the end of the day, when you get there, I think it's more fun, more interesting, and than the associate life, definitely, my opinion.
Okay. And could you share with us a high and low of your career?
So for low, I would say I'm generally very optimistic. But when I joined the firm 2011, I think I was the only person in my class that I haven't done a master's or any internship before. So that's weird. So I was wondering why these guys spend so many hours in the office and why they spend 8 a.m. until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. every day. What do they do in practice, right? So I even didn't know how to use the keyboard of the computer. Like I haven't ever chat online or anything else. So I basically, and this is true story, I didn't know how to put the euro symbol, for example, in the keyboard. So in my firm, you would do a rotation program where you spend 6 months in different departments, meeting the people and seeing what you like to do. And after that, it's a decision process where people is allocated in different practice areas, right? So I remember perfectly at that time, after 18 months, I thought I would be fired soon because no one wanted me in their team. Everyone was getting calls from 2 or 3 different teams to trying to convince them to stay with corporate litigation, whatever. And at the end of the day, they said, okay, I think no one wanted me. And they said, okay, the biggest team was corporate. I said, okay, let's put this guy in corporate for the next few months. And if he adds up, we'll keep him and otherwise we'll have to fire him. So that's probably the closest I was to being fired / quit, probably. And then for the highest, it was definitely when I received the email from the New York bar confirming that I passed the New York bar 2018, because for me it was a bit challenging to study the bar in English, which as you can see is not my mother tongue. So that was like for me probably one of the best moments of my career.
That's really fascinating. And I must say, I completely relate. I also took my master's degree much later than my bachelor's, which was quite unconventional, particularly in my country. And eventually I pursued an MBA about 6 or 7 years after graduating. And in hindsight, this was one of the best decisions I made. First of all, because I met Kira, but also I was able to study something I was genuinely interested in, and rather than just, doing it for the sake of having a degree. So talking about the importance of choosing a postgraduate degree, one thing we haven't really touched on yet was what led you to Columbia for your master's. Studying in the US is a big step, and Columbia is, of course, a prestigious university, but what was really behind that decision?
So my first time in the US was, I think, when I finished my second year in law school. So I got a scholarship. The first year I went to London, and the second year I went to the US with my best friend from high school. And then when I was a fourth year associate in the Madrid office, before they offered me to go to open the New York office of the firm, my friend was already in Georgetown doing his LLM. So then I think I just wanted to do the same. And I thought it would be good for my career. It would be a lot of fun as well. And I love my high school, but English wise, they were really bad at that time. I know they have improved a lot, but for me, it was a big challenge to learn English and to speak English. So I thought that would be great for me to spend some time in the US to try to improve a little bit my English skills. And also would be fun to travel all these wonderful national parks they have in the US, also Latin America. As I mentioned before, they offered me to open the new office. I was already thinking about applying to an LLM. And then when I was already in the US, after my second year in the New York office, they offered me to extend the stay in the New York office. But as you know, I want to do a master's and do this and do the New York part.
It must have taken quite some courage to say no to such an offer. Now, from your answer, I gather that despite your intense professional life, it's not all about work, work, work. Thinking of your journey and where life took you, friendship seems to have played a pivotal role, right? I was wondering, what do you do to decompress?
No, one thing I'm very proud of is that I think I haven't stopped doing anything because of work. And so I've been in about 65 different countries. And so I've run a marathon, I've climbed the Kilimanjaro. I love adventure, nature, animals. I've been watching the birds fishing salmons in Alaska. So I love traveling, hiking, nature, rafting. So basically sports and adventure.
Amazing. Now it's time for one of the hardest questions of this podcast. If you had to pick one song as a favorite, which one would it be?
In terms of meaning, not of fun, I think might be New York, New York. I think at some point it says it's up to you, New York. So for me, I read also a very good book. There are many good books. One is Outliers, and the other one is not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. So for me, again, it was a big challenge. There are no lawyers in my family. My parents have a different background. My father is a doctor. My mother is a teacher. So for me, becoming a lawyer without any family role or figure and not speaking English at all when I was 20 years old, it's been a bit challenging. And I think life can be challenging and there is sometimes setbacks or hurdles that you have to overcome on the way. But at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities and there is a lot out there offering in terms of work opportunities. As I mentioned, adventures, people, very nice people, a lot of opportunities for everything, whatever you want. So it's not about how good you are, it's how good you want to be, and it's up to you.
Pablo, you put this song in a completely different light for me. Now every time I hear it, I'll think of determination to forge one's own path. And you have done that very successfully. So thanks for sharing a fascinating career. And dear listeners, while you're listening to New York, New York, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and see you next week.